Um, Hello, welcome everyone. Um, Thank you, thank you. My name is Michael Slusarz. I'm product manager for DoveCot. Let me take you to this screen here. Um, a bit new to this domain industry, so I was asked to present, and I don't want to get too technical, so we're going to go a little lighthearted today. It's going to be on a technical topic, but we're going to try to keep it a bit high level. But you're going to learn something. You're gonna leave here whether you want to learn something or not. You're going to learn something. And so what we're going to talk about today is how email systems have evolved over the years. Email domains kind of in the same area. We're starting to see, certain verticals it blends. So I think it's a topic that might generally be interesting for people that aren't just in the email, like the hoster, specifically the hoster world. Now I'm going to switch to this side, right what you told me not to do. Um, and so really what we're going to do is how the modern operational best practices have changed because everybody likes a good story and it's going to be a history story. So this is going to be a little bit of a history presentation. I'm not going to take ourselves too seriously, but again, we're going to learn a little bit about email and maybe how how you, if you're interested in adding email to one of your market segments, that we can potentially help you. And the very important thing last year, we're not focusing on delivery. Delivery is a whole other thing that we could have hour-long discussions on that part of it. We'll be talking about the storage and retrieval. So we're going to keep it kind of simple. And then for those, and this is, we're not even going to be talking about the front end because I think a lot of you are familiar with the front end. So we got the front end over there. I don't work on that. I work on this side of the email industry. Kind of the ugly sign that we don't really talk about or you don't really notice, but it's back there. It's back there. So get that out of the way. And I used to do these presentations much more often, and maybe 5, 10 years ago, and everybody was email is dead, right? Email is a dead thing. False email is not dead, and I think people have, especially in the last 5 or 10 years, even with the other messaging systems that have kind of come online, the WhatsApps of the world and everything else, people realize that that's a niche of the market, but email is not going anywhere. I don't feel like I really have to have this slide in here, but we'll put it in here just to remind everybody. Email remains the most ubiquitous form of communication. More importantly, email is essentially your internet ID still. Whether for good or for bad, security wise, the security people don't necessarily like that, but that is the truth. It's been legally scrutinized. Everybody knows how to use email. And then you look at the numbers, really interesting. The numbers still 4 billion. I actually saw 4.5 billion looking this up this week. 8 billion active accounts and 3 million emails every second. And the amazing part about this is 50% of the world still doesn't have email. So there's still 3 to 4% organic growth year to year. So email's not dead. It may not be sexy anymore or it's kind of in the background, but everybody, uses it. So obviously the opportunity for potentially to take that. By the way, this is my friend. I'm going to call him Atticus. I think it's better if I show here his little at sign. This is Atticus. Atticus is my AI generated friend that I have no art skills, but ChatGPT can help me. So you'll see him appearing in various points throughout this presentation. So the question when you have to look at email from the big picture is email is not designed to be scaled. I would say idiots designed it, but you look at it and it's crazy that anybody ever invented a technical solution this way because security wise, you let anybody send you any information with, as much as they want to without any pre-authorization, right? That's kind of a crazy concept these days. It's open and federated. Anybody can join anybody can run a server, anybody can join the network. There's concurrency and locking. You have things like shared mailboxes, especially in more enterprises situations. You have multiple disparate clients that are accessing. And so locking is, if you get to something about you have to lock a mailbox. So you don't want the mailboxes to become unsynchronized. And then, stateful long running sessions. That's just the way the email works. It was a feature-based designed. The architecture was going to be built later on top of that. The problem is the killer features of email are literally the same things. So it's one of those things where you create this system with all these crazy concepts, and those are the concepts that really make it useful. So it's sort of a, how you have to take the good with the bad, essentially. So therein lies the challenge: is you have this crazy complicated system. Email scale is massive, and put that on top of that, and then emails almost become a utility at these points. Where if email goes down for 10 seconds, everybody complains, I can't do my work anymore, et cetera, et cetera. It's like power and water. Um, but it's nobody ever thinks of it unless it's broken. Um, yeah, I could make an American football analogy. There's not enough Americans here, but it's like you're the offensive lineman in American football that nobody notices until they get a penalty, penalties thrown on them. So that's what email is. So you have this whole big challenge that I've laid out here. You have to be scalable. Nobody pays attention to you, but you always have to be up, and you have to do it at low cost. So good luck. But that's what we as a company have decided to tackle, or at least my product, we've decided to tackle and been doing it for 25 years. So, but more on us later. We'll skip. Um, as I promised, we're going to kind of talk about now, like, this is what email is, and this is how email was designed. Now let's go quickly over the history of how email has been run as a service. Because I have 15 minutes, not 15 hours. So we're really going to break this down very simply. And if there's engineers here, they would be telling me I'm wrong. But this is very simple. So you have scaling over there on one side, and then over here on the side, we're going to talk about storage. Again, Atticus is telling you what we're going to do. Um, so, I don't even have 2 hours. So here's the history of the world in 2 seconds, because the beginning of the story needs an actual beginning. So first there were dinosaurs. Then the Romans killed the dinosaurs, and then email killed the Romans. It's something like that. So we get to the point, and here we are at email, 1970s. Email is approximately 1970s is where it began. It's my best attempt at I was a 70s child, so that's what it kind of looked like. And so when email began, and this is skipping ahead actually probably 10, 20 years, some of you old people, email was text-based, and you were running it on big systems for the first 20 years, up until like the early 90s. This is what for those people at the university, this is, you maybe run something like this, email clients. So you're running individual users logging onto a server. So your server looks something like that, and your storage lives in this little pizza box. And your scaling is this. This is how you scale. So, like, all the people in the university were on this box, for example, using university as a good example. So that's pseudo scale. And so actual real scaling, that is not really a thing. So it said you had one big box, and there's no such thing as actual scaling. And then it was easy to admin. For those of you that have watched the movie Jurassic Park, have seen, you only need one IT person to run the whole park, or I guess two IT people, but so it was somewhat simple, but as it's simple because there's no scale. You built a box, and it sat there, and you ran it for 20 years. That was just what happened. So moving forward a bit, we're going to move forward. This is my 90s representation of email. T-shirts coming after the presentation. You started seeing things like, right, people using or email clients. Email clients started maturing. There's some standards that happen where you can start sending attachments, and makes it much more interesting for more average people. And obviously the growth of email, along with the growth of the internet, sort of hockey sticked, went up. But this also mean that you're having more email, more storage, more usage. And so I'm going to use these little, this is representation of scaling and storage. And so when you reach the kind of the 90s and getting to the late 90s, you had something called sharding, where you just kind of took what we had before, and now you have more users. So you kind of put them all on different servers. And so that's what this represents. These are all different servers. They're not necessarily the same. You have to administer each one of these differently. So it's, this is the way that email is evolving, but it's still those servers are still the things that are expected to run for very long periods of time. It used to be a badge of honor, and I have it. It's over here somewhere. It used to be a badge of honor how long your server could stay up for. So 4,393 days before the last time we turned this server off. We'll get to how ridiculous this is in today's world, but that's the way it was. So again, you're scaling servers by you buy a box, and then you run email in that box for 8 years, and that was the capacity wasn't enough that you really had to worry about it. But nope, the world wanted more, right? We need more email, more bandwidth, and so we move into the 2000. This is the 2000. That's very Sorry, I may not copyright. Perry Hotter. So 2000s. So all of a sudden, people started having more devices. And by the way, this is a real picture. This guy apparently was playing. It was the Pikachu game where they were trying to find the virtual Pikachu's, and he had 11 phones. So, but anyways, you have more devices, which means more connections to your server, and you're using your email because it's just more and more and more. And so your scaling starts to look sorry, your scaling moves away. And now with more scaling, what people decided to do, because you're scaling, you used to have your storage was still on your servers. And now people realize, nope, now you got to split apart your servers from your storage, and your storage lives in a big thing over here somewhere, and your scaling was over there. And so that's the way they're trying to expand. But again, this is not happening. People aren't deciding or planning this out. They're kind of shoehorning this into the way they had done it before. They really didn't take a step back and think about how do we do. It was just things were moving so fast. This is the best way they could do it in the time frame that they had. That becomes important here at the end of my presentation. But now we can start getting, more into today and more in the internet, and 50%, 60% of the world using email. So it's not just more, it's more and more, and more, it's just the scaling and more and more and more. So we eventually get to today. This is my representation of the 2020s. And now we've reached a point where luckily, people have time to think about this problem. This is not an email problem. This is a general internet problem that you go from scaling from that to all of a sudden scaling is something where all the servers kind of look the same and everything's the same and it's all just Spider-Man. And over here, the storage is the same way where you don't have these disparate storage things anymore. It's just something you point at and it all looks the same. Um, and this goes back to what I said before. And now we're in a situation where the servers don't stay up for 4,000 days. They stay up for half a day because what we've reached is the holy grail of, sorry, I apologize. In the UK, I should be using this instead. The holy grail of administration, at least as we know as circa 2025, is ignore the complexities of what this is. It's cloud, right? So finally we get there, we're in a situation today where we've gone from this whole situation where email was started off and you had all, the way you run it. And now here we are 50 years later and a completely different paradigm of how you actually run these things on a back end to be able to do this efficiently. Backups, redundancy, high availability, durability. You can upgrade these things now instead of keeping them up for 4,000. I will show you. I tried to. This was AI telling it to draw an infographic comparing block storage, which was the old way of doing things with object storage, and it's that. I don't really know what it means, but I just thought I'd put it on there. Um, so that's where we're at. We're at cloud. But again, you had all these systems, these email systems that were designed for this old way of doing things, and you still have the pesky application architecture. And this gets a little bit technical, so I'll kind of quickly go over it. But once you move to object storage, which is that scalable storage that all looks the same, the Spider-Man storage, there's massive latency. So it's not like the storage anymore on the local servers. You have massive latency, so you have to work around that. Like object storage has a bunch of advantages when it comes to reliability and redundancy, but you have to work around the limitations. Shared access, it becomes a problem when you start working in cloud because it's hard to lock mailboxes over distance. That's just a fundamental engineering problem. And then these stateful long running sessions, again, is not built for the way that cloud is. Cloud is an HTTP thing going here and you get a response, right? That's the way that cloud really is designed. So we have what I call, or what I like to call, it's the Norath's boat problem. If you don't know Norath's boat, but it's the idea of rebuilding something, essentially rebuilding the ship while you're on the sea. I think is the way that you can frame it. How do I have it? It's like repairing the boat at the sea, and this is my attempt at, again. Thank you, AI. I try to put IKEA instructions in there and some duct tape and a glue gun. But the idea being that the email, again, has as it's hockey sticked up in the number of usage and the storage and etc. There was never a time where you could sit back and breathe and actually change the system that's running it. So it's always felt like this. It's always felt like you're trying to change things and never really taking a time to step back and look at things. I'm going to take a quick aside just because I actually asked ChatGPT for other other synonyms for repairing a boat at sea. It came back with teaching algebra to raccoons. Don't really understand the connection, but it did draw me a really cool picture, so I did want to share it. And then the one that actually made more sense was installing parachutes mid free fall. I thought that was actually pretty clever, except this is the graphic it gave me for that. Still have no idea. This man's name is Mr. Parachute or whatever. But again, I think AI is a very cool, neat tool. Still not quite there. Anyway, so going back, we got to this point, and this is where I get to switch to my salesperson mode for about 1 minute. Is we at DoveCot have seen all of this going. We were there at the 25. DoveCot's been a product for 25 years. We did things the old way, the old paradigm. And about 5 years ago, we realized cloud is the future. Cloud's not going away. So with cloud, we had to step back and fundamentally look at how we were running DoveCot. And what that is a complete rewrite of our architecture and kind of a storage integration to be able to best handle the way that email is run in 2025 versus the way it was running in the previous years in the but as we saw, the 1970s, the 80s, 90s, et cetera, et cetera. Real quickly, DoveCot, just to brag a little bit, we have 75% of the worldwide mail servers. So essentially, Google and Microsoft do count as one mail server. So it's not necessarily the amount of accounts, but 75% of people that have an email server running are running my software somehow. And really, telcos, ISP, cloud providers, but hosters are an important part, and plenty of hosters run DoveCot. We're moving into public sector and some other things. So DoveCot is the number one. You may not be aware of us, but we're the number one player in the market. Real quickly, so what we came up with is this DoveCot Pro 3. That's the version we're on. And what DoveCot Pro 3 does is essentially all the things I was showing you before, which is architecture and storage support. The architecture is the scaling part. Is we sat back and said, our software has gotten 75% of the market share, but we don't think that's good enough because it's not going to help our customers run for the next 10, 15 years. So we've completely reorganized what we did with DoveCot. And this slide, once it pops up, will show you that it maintains the stuff that made us such a market leader before. We're not throwing, the way I like to say it is, we're rebuilding the house. We're not tearing down the house and creating a new one. And there's some stuff in here. We've actually had object storage support, which is a real critical thing for about 10 years now. So it's not something we've invented recently. It's been in production in 10 million user installations for years. We're proud of that. But on top of that, what we have now, and this slide will be a little bit technical, so I'll just kind of tell you the summary of it. We essentially rewrote the architecture to be cloud native, which is not an easy thing to do. I'll have the next graphic will show you. There's things like zero downtime maintenances, which is expected these days, which you can't do with the old way of doing things. Built-in health checking, stateless. The statelessness is really important. If you ask any operations person, that stateless is the way that the cloud needs to be run, or it's really the only way you can run things on quote unquote cloud. And all that leads to lower operational costs, which help, the user gets a better experience, and you as the business owner also gets to, make more or be more efficient, and which is, again, money. So real quickly, again, you can go and build your own email system, but this is what email systems look like these days, and this is kind of a basic representation. Unfortunately, we can't make this less complicated right now because there's reasons for all these components. But each one of these things we work on every single day, so we kind of know what we're doing. So please come talk to us if you want to do email. So if you don't remember any of this other stuff, I'll just remind you. So this will be the last thing in your mind: recency, primacy. That's the way you always do a presentation. So the last things I'll leave you with is, if that over there is just basic email, other people do email. This is DoveCot Pro is obviously much better. If that over there is email, and yes, that is a cat and some sort of, this is DoveCot Pro is, a super cat. That one's for you, Sebastian. And then finally, to bring it full circle to the history of the world, if that was email as the dinosaur, we're dinosaurs with laser beams, just kind of throwing you on stuff. So hopefully you learned something. If not, it's in your brain, you're stuck with it. We would love to hear about you or your new puppy or whatever. DoveCot, we love email. It's kind of a weird thing to say in this time and age, but this is what we enjoy doing. So please come talk to us downstairs or anytime. And thank you for listening.